Welcome to the Savvy Dentist Podcast with Dr. Jesse Green, the show where great dentistry meets great business. Listen in each week as we bring you an inspiring person who will share their story, ideas, and business techniques to help you create a practice and a life you love. And now introducing your host, Dr. Jesse Green.
Brian Moran, thank you so much for taking the time to come and join us all the way from Michigan. It's wonderful to have you on the program.
Yeah, it's great to be with you.
Oh, look, I wanted to just for a moment touch on the fact your book, the 12-week year, Get More Done in 12 Weeks Than Others Do in 12 Months, has been a wonderful read. I bought this book several years ago. It's a New York Times bestseller. And firstly, I just want to say thank you for writing such a good book. It's a wonderful read, so I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for the comments. Appreciate that. You know, we wrote that book really with the notion of helping people apply it. So it wasn't just theory. We had originally just documented what we were doing with our clients, and I think that's part of the reason why it's a pretty easy read. Is that we didn't sit down and come up with a theory and try and hang things on it. It was just documented what we were doing with clients that worked.
It's really interesting. I wanted to kind of start at the beginning, Brian, because obviously I enjoyed this book. It's a New York Best Time Seller, which tells me there's a lot of people that enjoyed this book as well. And so clearly, if there's a lot of people reading this book, a lot of people enjoying this book, there's obviously a problem that people are seeking to address or to remedy. And I thought, let's start right back there as to why is it, do you think, that some people really resonate with this book? Is it the fact that they feel like they're just trying to get too much done in not enough time, or is it they feel like there's more to be done than they get the opportunity to do? There's unfulfillment. What was the underlying issue that you're seeking to address?
Great question. You know, what we found in working with clients is, and it didn't matter what industry they were in, because we've worked in just about every industry, there was kind of this notion that, boy, if I just knew something that I don't know, right? And so we're always searching for more knowledge, more techniques, new processes, things like that. And what we realized is that it's really about the execution. Most organizations, most individuals have great ideas. They have resources. They have access to all kinds of technology now and everything else. But the big bugaboo is really the execution. I mean, we would argue that great ideas are worthless unless they're executed. And knowledge for knowledge's sake may have some value, but it's not very valuable in terms of a business or a career. It's really about the execution. And so the 12-week year is an execution system. And it's the one system that everybody needs that very few individuals and organizations have. I mean, they've got CRMs, they've got all kinds of sales and back office systems and servicing systems. The one system that drives them all is the execution system. And so it was pretty early on, Michael, the co-author, and I realized that where we could have the biggest impact was helping people execute more consistently.
Well, it's funny that you talk about execution, and I 100% agree with you, because in the work that we do as well, we've got plenty of clients that we work with, and it's universal truth, really, that the ones that get the best results from their work with us are the ones that are able to execute really, really well. And having a system around that is really interesting. And I wanted to talk about your redefinition of the year. You've kind of changed the concept of 12 months to 12 weeks. And again, help me understand, what was the thinking? What drove that? Why is 12 weeks the magic number rather than, say, 6 weeks or 8 weeks? Why 12 weeks?
Yeah, great question. You know, we were working with our clients, and we work the way most people do in the context of an annual environment, right? We help them set annual goals and build plans that way and broke them down quarterly and monthly and weekly. And we got good results, but we didn't get what they were capable of. And so we were looking for something, and we came across a concept in athletics called periodization. And it began in the 70s with Olympic athletes, used in most sports today. And we saw that and we said, that has applicability for what we're doing in our business and what we're doing with our clients. And that's really where the 12-week year was born. And so we realized that an annual environment was just too long a time. Right? Everyone starts out January thinking best year ever. They get to the end of January, they're behind. But nobody's worried. Why is that? Because the mindset, the thinking is, I got 11 more months to catch up. And that's the thing that we realized we had to get out of. And we were never going to change that in the annual environment. Even quarterly, right? A quarter is part of a whole. So we borrowed from periodization, moved beyond athletics, adapted it for business and personal life. And that's what the 12-week year was born. So our clients operate in the context of every 12 weeks as a year.
Yeah.
And by the way, there aren't 4 of those in the year. That's annualized think. It's just this 12-week year followed by the next and so on. And to your question, 12 weeks seems to be a long enough time to make profound progress, but near enough where we don't lose sight of the deadline. So what happens in a 12-week year is there's a healthy sense of urgency that's created, which is really the difference maker. That's the key difference between a 12-week year and a 12-month year, is the healthy urgency that you operate within, which causes you to be more consistent with the things that really matter. Not perfect, just more consistent. And in a very short period of time, that starts to act like compound interest. I mean, one more of those things done today and one more tomorrow and one more the next day and the next week and the next week. And in 12 short weeks, right, the impact is significant.
I really love the idea of healthy urgency, as you say, really, really important. Just to go back a little bit, because I want to just touch on periodization. I think I've got a working knowledge of it and certainly not an expert on it, but there'll be some people listening to this show that might go, okay, I know it's come from athletics, but what does it mean in the sporting sense and how does that translate? So could we just start there and just have a short conversation about periodization, just so that, again, we can bring the listener along that journey with us?
Yeah. So the way we were working with a client, and the CFO came to Michael and I said, hey, are you guys familiar with periodization? And I remember coming across it in college when I was working out and stuff like that. But we took a look at it, and with periodization, he was into cycling, this guy was. So he was following the U.S. Postal Team and the Tour de France and all that stuff. And so a typical routine for cycling might be, like Monday might be a light ride, Tuesday would be hills, Thursday would be sprints, Friday would be road, that kind of thing. And they do that every week. With periodization, the concept was, let's focus on one discipline at a time and really overload it so we raise the base level emotionally and physically to handle it. So with cycling, for instance, they would do hill climbing every day for 6 weeks. And then they'd move to sprints. And what happened in that is, because of the intense focus, you were able to make progress much more quickly and get to a level you couldn't get to otherwise. And so we saw that. We said, what, business and life isn't quite like athletics, right? But there's some tenets there that we can pull from that. One is focus. 2 is the shorter time frame where we're really focused on making improvements, making things happen. And if you look at most of the stuff that happens physically, whether you're trying to lose weight or build muscle or whatever, they're 12-week programs. And part of that is because of the notion that 12 weeks is a right amount of time in terms of making progress, but there's that urgency. Yeah. And so in athletics, it's used in most sports today, whether you know it or not, but it is the concept of focus, sprints, rest, recover, focus, sprints, rest, recover, that kind of concept that we borrowed from it. And then we had to adapt it, obviously, but we pulled those key tenets from it.
Yeah. So I think that's a really, really
shorter
important.
Time frames were really critical.
I'm loving that. And I would think the rest and recovery piece is really important too, because one of the things that I've certainly been guilty of in the past is to almost try and do a sprint across a 12-month period. And of course, that doesn't work, as we all know. Yeah. So could we just touch on what rest and recovery looks like and the value of that in this cyclic approach?
Yeah. If you think about, like what you just said, trying to sprint for 12 months is just, you burn out is what happens. I mean, we all have limited capacity, limited energy, limited time, limited physical, limited intellectual. It's not a knock. It's just, it is, right? And so how we use it really matters. So with the 12-week year, there is this 13th week. And the 13th week is the week where we look back and we learn, right? The 12-week years, I like to say it's a guilt-free zone. We can't change last week. We can't change last month, but we can learn from it. And so in that 13th week, we're going to take some time. We're going to look back, what worked, what didn't work, figure out what we might do different the next 12 weeks. And then we're going to lock and load for the next 12 weeks. We're also going to take some time and celebrate, right? This is the rest period. Because what you celebrate matters. It creates focus. It shapes culture. It creates energy. And with the 12-week year, you have more opportunities to celebrate, so that there's that time in between 12-week years, just like there would be annually, right? Most people take some downtime at the holidays, they reflect, they kind of get centered. Same thing, only this is every 12 or 13 weeks. We have that opportunity. We have a fresh start, if you will.
Yeah,
so
nice.
If we've had a really difficult 12-week year, we can shake it off and start new. If we have a great one, we build on it. But regardless of what's happened in the last 12 weeks, we're going to take some time to celebrate the progress as well as the successes and really get centered and focused on what we want to make happen the next 12 weeks.
No, that's fantastic. I think that's, again, having that opportunity to review, to reset, and to reload, I think is going to be really, really key. I wanted to ask you a little bit about volume of work, because one of the things that, again, I know lots of people who work in business, in the entrepreneurial space, and same in dentistry, is we have this ability to overestimate what we're going to get done. And so when we're looking at these 12-week increments or 12-week years, how do we know really what's a reasonable amount to try and load up on and to reset for that period of time, so that we're actually getting through stuff and not kind of trying to take on too much in one go? Do you have any thoughts around volume of work? What's a healthy amount? What's an optimal amount? Obviously, there's going to be variability across the board. I accept that. But
Sure.
That's just something I'm curious to ask if you have a philosophy around that.
Yeah, the truth is most people take on too much, even in the 12-week year, and even if they've been doing it a while, because the tendency is, I want to do all this stuff. I want to make it all happen. And there will always be more to do and more to pursue than you have time to effectively do it. So we're always coaching people to this concept of less is more. And it's because that we have limited capacity. And so every time you take on one more thing, the probability of you being great at any of it diminishes exponentially. And so our philosophy is, let's be great at a few things versus mediocre at many. So on the business side of things, we may say, let's focus on one, maybe two goals. Because when you start to get three or more, you're typically setting yourself up to struggle. And it doesn't matter whether you're a team of 5 or you're a team of 5,000 or 50,000. I mean, we work with billion-dollar companies that have tens of thousands of people. It's still all about the focus. Otherwise, what happens is you're this hamster on the wheel, and you're working really hard, but you make a little bit of progress across a broad spectrum. That's a recipe for mediocrity and burnout. And the 12-week year is let's be focused. Let's nail a few things, really move the needle. Then we'll celebrate that. We'll rest, and then we'll lock and load for the next 12 weeks. And we're not trying to plan for 12 months. Part of the reason why people take on too much is because they're locked into this 12-month cycle, and 12 months seems like a ton of time that I can do all this stuff. But there's still limited capacity in that.
Okay, I love that. All right, so I wanted to talk about, choosing what to take on. And I love in your book, you talk about interested versus committed, and you give that wonderful story of the pig and the chook when it comes to breakfast. The chicken is interested because they're providing the egg, but the pig is truly committed. And you do say, though, that paints commitment in a rather bad light, in the sense it's kind of got to be an all-in near-death experience, I should say, to really be committed. But I wanted to talk about interested versus commitment versus, in the context, I should say, of how to choose those things. What are the vital few things that we should focus on? So as we're filtering through the opportunities that we could pursue, what sort of filtering process do you go through to determine what makes the grade or what makes the cut?
Yeah, so there's two different looks at that. One is on the personal side. So on the personal side, we look at 7 different areas, and we have people every 13 weeks rate themselves from 1 to 10, spiritually, spouse, key relationships, health, finances, that type of thing. And so we're looking for areas there that you're not happy with, that you go, okay, you know what? It's time I do something about my fitness or my marriage or whatever that is. Okay. So, and realizing that you're not going to necessarily set goals and try and work on all 7 of those areas simultaneously, because again, that's going to set yourself up to fail.
Sure.
On the business side, it's not too much different. Every 12 weeks, every 13 weeks, we're going to stop. We're going to look at, okay, what's worked, what hasn't worked, where are we at as an organization? Everything we do ties to a longer term vision. It starts with a personal vision, and then there's the organizational vision. So those two are linked, even for the part-time employees, so that there's, we call it connecting the dots between what I do Monday through Friday and this life I want to live.
Yeah.
And so we start with the person. What do you want your life to be like? Then we go to the practice, in this case, right? The dental practice. What does that need to look like 3 years from now, 5 years from now to enable the life I want to live? And then we set 12-week goals in alignment with that. And so every 12 weeks, you're looking at that longer term vision and saying, okay, in order for me to be here in 3 years, what is most important over the next 12 weeks? And what you'll do is you'll come up with what we call strategic considerations. We could work on this. We could work on this. We could work on this. We could work. Okay. If you had to pick one, that you were just going to focus in on the next 12 weeks and you're going to nail that, what would that be? And if you could pick one more, okay, let's stop there. If we do those two things in the next 12 weeks, how will we be feeling 12 weeks from now?
Yeah.
If we're going to be celebrating, we're going to be feeling great. We don't need anything more. And being mindful about, look, if we add one more, the probability of us nailing these first two drops.
Yeah.
So we say one's better than two, two's better than three, but it's always driven by the trend from the past as well as where we want to be in the future. So, when people first start setting 12-week goals, like in a practice like that, they'll look at the revenue for 12 months and they'll say, okay, let's do a quarter of it. And we say, no. That's one data point. But if you're going to set that as a goal, you're probably limiting yourself. Because we have lots of people that do in 12 weeks what they used to do in 12 months. So you also want to look at what's the best 12 weeks you've ever had, right? What kind of momentum do we have? What tailwinds, what headwinds, right? All those factors play in. And over time, you're going to base your 12-week goals more on the trends from the previous 12 weeks than you would any annualized number.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah. And what I just am reflecting on as you're saying that is the fact that you look at perhaps your best 12 weeks in the past as well. And how do we make that the new normal? Or how do we use that as a baseline that we know that we can hit consistently and well? And of course, you're going to get this virtuous cycle upwards of constant and never-ending improvement. When it comes to goals, you touched on revenue as a goal, and clearly revenue is important to business. We get that.
Yeah.
One of the challenges that I see in business is that sometimes the goals that people connect or take on, if they're not conflicting goals, they're certainly disparate goals. Do you know what I mean? Rather than having self-reinforcing goals or, I want to drive revenue and then I'm going to load up my project is going to be build a new website or whatever it happens to be, right? And so trying to make sure there's cohesion with that bigger picture, the goals that you set, and making sure we're not inadvertently setting ourselves up for conflicting goals. Or the other thing I see quite commonly is having all the actions and activities fall to one section of the team. So you've got one part of the team that's completely overloaded and the other part of the team's sitting there twiddling their thumbs. Could you just speak to that for a moment? Because I know that that's an issue that does come up for lots of practice owners.
Sure. And so there's two types of activities you'll see in a 12-week plan. One is kind of the core that drives the economic engine, right? That would be a revenue goal and activities around that.
Yep.
The other would be what we call a goal or activity to build capacity, right? I'm adding hygienists. I'm adding a new piece of technology. I'm adding a new assistant, whatever it may, but it's designed to increase capacity in the future.
Yep.
So a lot of entrepreneurs lean towards that new capacity stuff because it's exciting. It's sexy, it's shiny. And we say, look, you may or may not have that type of goal in a 12-week plan, but you're always going to have a goal around what drives the economic engine because you got to eat along the way.
Yep.
And so that's where we start. And here's the thing. If your business isn't growing, it's not healthy. And so for your dentists, right, they should always have a revenue goal. And what falls underneath that from an activity standpoint could be everything from improving our service to gaining new clients, right, new patients, to doing more of the cosmetic dentistry or whatever, right, the higher ticket stuff. I mean, that would all fall under driving revenue.
Yes.
I mean, so we worked with an orthodontist and we focused on driving revenue through starts. With orthodontists, it's the day they strap on the metal. That's the thing. 2 starts or 3 starts a day, they're usually pretty happy. There you go. Well, we doubled it with this guy, and he had a very significant practice, but that was based on setting a revenue target and then looking at, okay, how many starts do we have? What do we think we can do? And taking a shot, right? And then walking it out and figuring out, because there is no perfect plan.
No.
So some of it's going to work, some of it's not. But monitoring as we go and figuring out, okay, this didn't work, but this did. Okay, now what kind of feedback did we get from the marketplace on the stuff that didn't work so we can make an adjustment?
Yeah.
And that's one of the keys with the 12-week year. The reason we plan tactically, and it's a big difference between conceptual plans. Most plans are conceptual. You can't execute concepts.
No.
Get referrals is a great concept. it doesn't execute. You've got to get tactical where the statements in the plan describe actions that someone takes. But when we do that, now it leaves a breadcrumb trail because we'll know specifically which actions worked and which ones didn't, which is how you dial it in. And so, there's no perfect plan. You're going to go out there, you're going to put your best plan together, and then literally you go out and succeed or fail as fast as you can, take that feedback and tighten it up. Yeah. That's how you dial it in.
Yeah, loving that. Brian, I want to ask you about the relationship between the individual and the business, and you have touched on that already. What I wanted to ask you is, if we're looking at the business, the practice, having its 12-week plan, and then obviously we're going to make sure that the individuals within the business have their own 12-week plan as well. I'm assuming that's how it hangs together. So you'll have your corporate 12-week or your practice-based 12-week, and then each individual underneath that will have their own contribution to be done in week 1, week 2, week 3, so on and so forth. Is that a fair assessment of that?
Almost. So in a practice, what you'd see is we would have what's called a team plan. It's the way our organization plans. Our leadership team, we have one plan.
Yep.
We have a set of goals. Some of the actions have my name, some have Michael, some have Judy's, some have Karen's, that type of thing. And in a practice like that, it would be very similar. There'd be this one 12-week plan that we're all contributing to.
Yep.
On a weekly basis, though, what happens is that the actions are parsed out to whoever has their name attached.
Got it.
So we have one team plan for the 12 weeks. Every week, though, each person has their individual weekly plan.
Yeah.
Which doesn't contain everything they do. It's just what's doing the 12-week plan this particular week that has their name attached to it.
Yeah, perfect.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And so then what I want to ask is, how do you integrate that with a personal 12-week plan as well? I guess it's just a case of merging those things. So if I'm running my practice 12-week plan, but I've got a personal 12-week plan, can they coexist, or am I at risk then? This is where I want to come back to controlling the workload.
Yeah.
Am I at risk then of going, I'm trying to stuff too much into my 12-week plan?
Yeah, no, they do coexist. And the way it shows up is I'll have this team plan for the practice. I'll have an individual plan for me. Where it's combined is on a weekly basis.
Yep.
So we have a piece of software called Achieve that houses all this. And what that does is it takes the things from the team plan that have your name on them, puts them in your weekly plan, takes your tactics from your individual plan that are due this week and puts them in your weekly plan. So your weekly plan is where the two come together.
Yep. Perfect.
There's always the risk, though, that, look, I'm taking on too much. And you'll know that pretty quickly.
Okay.
Because you'll start to fall behind. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at your practice and you said, okay, my plan calls for me to work strategically 40 hours a week, that's not going to happen. That's not realistic. Right? You can't work on the business that much time because you got to be into business. And that's just not for a dentist. I mean, that's any business owner. It's this combination of really carving out time to work on the business. A lot of the strategic stuff is working on it. It's not working in it.
Yeah.
And so, you really have to be mindful of the fact that, look, there's day-to-day stuff that happens that I'm going to have to deal with. And if I try and fill my whole week with strategic work, I'm going to bomb out. It's just not practical. It's not feasible.
One of the things I wanted to ask you as well, with the 12 weeks, is there a cycle, is there a rhythm or a pattern within the 12 weeks, or is it just whatever the plan dictates? Like we spoke using cycling as an example earlier, and you said, yes, we're going to go from having a day of hills and a day of track and a day of something to having 6 days of this or 6 days of that. I wanted to ask whether there's a cadence within the 12 weeks.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. And by the way, in athletics, it would be 6 to 12 weeks of just hill climbing, not 6 days.
Okay, sorry.
So it's an extended period of time, right?
Clearly,
it's okay.
I don't cycle.
I think it's important to make that distinction. Yeah, sure. And so there is a cadence to the 12-week year, in that there's things you do every week with the 12-week year, right? We're gonna track our results. We're gonna measure our execution. We're gonna score our execution. That happens every week. We're gonna take our weekly plan and we're gonna calendarize it, and that's gonna drive our week. So there is this cadence to how we go through the week. We meet as a team first thing Monday to talk about the successes from last week, what was due, what got done. So there's a cadence to that. What drives the activity, though, is really what's in the plan and what you're trying to accomplish. And so it's not unusual for a group to have a goal that, might be 6 weeks even, and they have a second goal set up behind it, right? Because it's something, it may be more project-based. and they feel like, okay, we're going to knock this out and then we can take this out. So this one ends in week 6, this one starts in week 7. But for the most part, your plan is going to cover the 12 weeks, and that dictates how you win the week.
Yeah.
Right? We execute that plan this week, we win. We do all the other stuff and this doesn't get done, then kind of all bets are off.
Yeah. So what's been the most interesting thing you've seen as people go through this, Brian? What sort of things have come up where you've gone, wow, that's really fascinating?
Man, it's a myriad of things, to be honest with you. There is this notion that what happens in this with the 12-week year is because it's a tactical plan, because it's all visible, there's transparency, there's clarity, right? There's nowhere to hide. And so oftentimes what happens is if we're going to take our performance to another level, there's probably things in the plan we haven't done before. So there's a level of discomfort that we're facing. And people tend to shy away from that. And what happens is they sort of mentally blame that on the 12-week year.
Okay.
And the 12-week year has nothing to do with it. It's the fact that you're trying to take new ground. It's just the 12-week year shining a light on it for you. But what happens is people go, wow, this stuff's really uncomfortable. This is difficult. I was with a big insurance group, and about 20 of them are going, hey, this is, we're really struggling to do the 12-week year. And I said, so tell me what the struggle is, because I use it. So I know it takes me 5 minutes a week to go through the process of the 12-week year. And what they realized is the struggle was actually getting themselves to do what was in the plan, which really has little to do with the 12-week year itself. It's about what you have to do to hit the goal.
Yep.
The 12-week year didn't determine that. The marketplace determined that, right? The marketplace said, hey, if you want to hit this goal, you got to do these things. Now, you've got a choice. You can shy away from that or you can lean into it. The 12-week year is going to keep putting it front and center. And there's process that we have that helps you lean into it. But ultimately, that's a choice you got to make day in and day out. That's why vision is so important. Right. So I can connect these activities that I might tend to shy away from to look, I don't have to do this stuff. I only have to do this stuff if I want to live this kind of life.
Yeah.
And because this matters to me, I'm willing to lean into that discomfort. I'm willing to lean into that uncertainty instead of leaning away from it.
I love that. And the thing around that is what I'm hearing you say is if we're going to be constantly pushing the comfort zone levels a little bit, we're going to step into this new ground that you speak about, then we're going to experience moments of discomfort because that's what growth is. And whether it's 12-week year or doing something new in anything, there's always going to be moments of discomfort. It could be learning how to, play tennis or golf or something. There's always going to be moments of discomfort in anything new. And I appreciate the fact that when you're playing tennis and you're hitting for the lines and you're opening up the court and you're trying to create opportunities, it's like that in business as well. You've got to create those opportunities. You've got to be pushing for that. And when you step outside that comfort zone, you always got to be prepared for the fact that you're going to have some discomfort. So I really appreciate that. And I thank you for acknowledging it because it is the reality of it. Rather than pretending it's rainbows and unicorns and the 12 weeks a year is going to be a silver bullet, it's a wonderful execution tool. And you've still got to have the mindset to be able to lean into that. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. And that's the key to it, honestly. I think the biggest challenge we have is we're wired for comfort. Right? It takes sacrifice to be great, but you don't have to sacrifice your values, your integrity, your sanity, any of that stuff. But you are going to have to sacrifice your comfort because you're going to step into things you haven't done before. And it doesn't matter how successful you are. Every time you do that, there's some discomfort, there's some uncertainty, there's some anxiety with that. So the game is really, how do you get yourself to continue to step into that? Because confidence comes from competence. Competence comes from reps, right? You've got to do it. So the first couple of times you do it, it's not going to be magically comfortable, and you're probably not going to be very good at it either. So it's really about having that mindset that says, okay, the reason I'm willing to go through that is because this is what it creates for me in terms of my life, my lifestyle, things I can do for my family, the legacy I leave, the impact I have, the self-image, the confidence that comes from doing that.
Yeah. And I know, look, Brian, for people listening to this, there is a getting started course with the 12-week year. So people who do want to get started, that they can head across to 12weekyear.com/getting started. So 12weekyear.com/getting started for those that are interested. And in that getting started course, I imagine that you're setting people up with that mindset so that they can deal with those things that come up, because as we've discussed already, it's one thing to have the implementation or the execution system, but we've got to understand that we are innately wired for comfort, and we've got to be able to deal with that and embrace that discomfort, because if we're willing to grow or wanting to grow, we've got to embrace that bit of discomfort. So I know you discuss that throughout the book and in other areas as well. So I think there's a great resource there. Mate, you've been really generous with your time today, and I want to say thank you. What I have enjoyed about this book immensely, and I have read it a couple of times already, what I really appreciate about this book is it is actionable. As you said, it's not a difficult read. It's not like we're talking about atomic particles and physics and all that sort of stuff. This is a really practical and useful book. I've read it a couple of times, as I said, and more than practical and useful, it's actionable. And so I would encourage anyone listening to the program to grab a copy of the book, head across to the 12weekyear.com website and have a look around there. But Brian, are there any other particular resources you think might be helpful for people to get started with around this?
The Getting Started course is a really great one. There's another field guide too that's available on Amazon. But 12weekyear.com, you can find all of that. We have the online software. We have all the way up to one-on-one performance coaching, with one of our certified coaches. And so everything in between, if we can help. Our mission is to change lives. So we're all about having an impact, making a difference. And 12weekyear.com is where you can find all those resources.
Wonderful. Mate, thank you so much for taking the time to articulate the 12-week year concepts, the practical elements of it, the components that make up. And I know we haven't gone through all of it in detail. There's a lot of depth and substance behind this, but it's been really good to get a high-level overview and to dive into a couple of those key areas so people can get a bit of a taste of that. It's something that I've used, I find very helpful. I continue to use it, and I really enjoy the process. So thank you so much for taking the time to write the book. I know how hard it is to get a book out. Even if it is innately familiar to you, there's a lot of effort that goes into that. So thank you for doing it, mate.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thanks for having me on. I hope this makes a difference for your clientele.
Thank you, mate.
Thank you for listening to the Savvy Dentist podcast with Dr. Jesse Green. For more free tools and resources, join the free Facebook group. Visit drjessegreen.com/Facebook. And for more episodes, visit drjessegreen.com/savvydentist.